Hey guys, it's Weeks here, back with another Path of Exile video. Today we're going to be going over a build guide for the CI Molten Strike Juggernaut. Really you could run any skill, but we decided to use Molten Strike. This build, we really like it because it's super tanky. It's basically all content viable. We've been able to do all the Guardians, Elder Guardians, Shaper, Elder, Uber Elder, the Breach Lords. Haven't had any issues with the Syndicate or doing Delve. Some of the best parts of the build is just how tanky it is and that you can do all the content. It's very flexible. I would say some of the cons would probably be that it's kind of a slow mapper, but it can do all map mods except for Elemental Reflect, since all our damage is going to be elemental. And it's probably a more expensive build to max out, but it's kind of cheap to get started, so you shouldn't have too many issues there if you want to play a build like this. Leveling, you can really just use any leveling uniques. I'd probably level as life and then switch to energy shield a little later on. But without further ado, let's get into the build guide. Hey guys, next up we're going to talk about gear. The build revolves around a couple different items. One is the Shaper's Touch gloves. You don't have to have corrupted ones, but it just helps with the damage. So as we stack our attributes, we're going to get more accuracy from intellect, more life from dexterity, more mana from dexterity, or for more mana for strength, more energy percentage for strength, evasion for intellect, and damage for dexterity. So keeping that in mind, we're going to go forward with some of the other items that kind of multiply this effect. So we have Hand of Wisdom in action. This gives us a % increased dexterity, % increased intellect, and we get 1 to 10 lightning damage to attacks with this weapon per 10 intelligence. We also get 1% attack speed per 25 dexterity. Next up we have, alright, so next item on our list is the Coil Belt, Fallopian Coil. It gives us, the life doesn't actually matter. We eventually want to get one corrupted that has % increased attributes, like increased dexterity, increased strength, or increased intellect. Some combination of those two would be best for us. The important role in this item is the 14% increased attributes. Obviously, if you can get 15, that would be better. By the end of the build, we're going to have more dexterity than intellect, so we won't be able to be frozen. That'll help when we put our flask. We also won't be able to be shocked because our intellect will be higher than our strength. We will be able to be frozen because dexterity will be lower than intellect, but we get around that by being a Juggernaut. So next up we run Aegis Aorta. This is not required for the build. You could really use any high energy shield, but I really enjoy using Aegis Aorta. I like the idea of the Aegis Aorta. We get a lot of armor and armor % from the Shaper's Glove and just the way we're stacking all of this together. So it kind of gives us a nice little buffer if we're getting hit by a lot of small things at the same time. Definitely not necessary. Also, the maximum cold res is nice against, say, things like Shaper, things like Elder. Next up we have the Incandescent Heart. So this fixes a few issues. So one, it's an armor chest that gets doubled because we're Juggernaut. So that's very nice. We get our attack leeched as life, so that's our source of leech for the build. We also get extra elemental damage as chaos, so just like a multiplier to our damage, more or less. A lot of added damage that can't be reflected to us. Very nice. We also get 25% of elemental damage from hits taken as chaos. We're CI, so we're immune to all of that damage that's taken as chaos. So we essentially take a quarter less damage from elemental damage, which is equal to around 5 max res if you're only at 75, which we are, except for the cold res, because we get the extra 5 here. And then it also fixes our light radius issue. Not that it's really a big deal, but it's a nice little, it's like 1 extra talent point, which is very nice. We use Astramentus as our necklace. You can get away with some other necks. Some nice Shaper Elder necks that have increased attributes or damage per intellect. Stuff like that, but this is more, I guess you could even say budget. This is the easy way to have an amulet, and it's just a lot of attributes. As for rares, we just have high energy shield rares. If you can get intellect on it, that's the best case scenario. Mine has a energy shield roll tier 2, and then I also crafted the strength and intellect because that was the most for my damage. It's almost equal to me putting a intellect and quality roll on this item. Well, actually I can't put intellect quality on this one, but for this helm, it was the same kind of thing. We had dexterity and quality, but the dexterity was giving us like an extra 1%, but we really needed the strength and intellect more. It just helps a lot more with your damage and your effective health. So we're already up to 5.4k ES. Same with the rings. You want intellect, some resist, and an open prefix to either craft weapon elemental damage or like a flat lightning roll. If you can get all 6, then that's awesome. But really a lot of things do well for you. Dex is always good, strength is always good, int's always good. As much resist as possible. Flat lightning damage to attacks is nice. Elemental damage with attack skills is also nice. Even mana isn't terrible because we're going to be using a Clarity Watcher's Eye. You get maximum mana as extra energy shield while affected by Clarity. So let's go ahead and put that in our tree. I'll kind of show you how important that is to the build. So we're currently at 6.2k energy shield with 1300 mana just from us stacking what strength. Yeah, strength gives us mana, and then intellect also gives us mana. So it brings us up to 7.4. We can also turn on discipline, and we're at 8.4. And we can start talking about the rest of these jewels. So we use a wildfire jewel, and this one specifically is corrupted with corrupted blood cannot be applied to you, which is very nice. It helps free up our flask, so we don't have to have a bleed flask. We still use one for puncture and some of the other bleeds in the game, but we really don't even have to. We could use something else. Other jewels, you're just looking for rare jewels with flat damage and energy shield. Lightning damage is the best because we use like lightning penetration, and we get even more lightning added with everything else. So it kind of stacks the best. You can get high lightning, but we also use fire and cold. So yeah, any of the damage will help, but we penetrate lightning, so that kind of helps the most. So a couple of Abyss jewels, just the same kind of thing. 2 damage rolls, energy shield. The higher the lightning roll you can get, the better. It's going to make these gems really nice. I think most of these average around 50 to like 60 damage, average damage. And then for regular jewels, I just go lightning damage, attack speed, area damage, some resist, different versions of attack speed, and you can also get some attributes because those are actually pretty good damage as well. So I'll just go ahead and put in all our jewels here. We'll start seeing what our energy shield is looking like. We also have one Fertile Mind for the slot here. As we talked about in the talents, we go for the Mana Leech and Point Blank. So we want to convert this dexterity to intellect because intellect does more for us than dexterity. Next up is the flask. So we use a couple different flasks. We want to use the Wise Oak. This is our kind of our best flask. If we look at our defenses, it's kind of what's going to be the most important when using this flask. So we're at 75, 80, 75, and our highest uncapped resist is going to be lightning at 134, which is the bulk of our damage. So we definitely want to be penetrating the damage with the lightning damage or the lightning resist. So keeping your lightning resist the highest is definitely very important. And we activate this flask, it at least activates all of our resist to the same level. We also want to use a Dying Sun in the build. So when we use both these flasks together, it's going to push fire higher than lightning. So we're actually going to use a Vessel of Vinctar as well. All these flasks are good for our build. Cold is our lowest, so we actually take less damage from cold, which is good with Shaper and Elder. There is a world where you could get all these balanced and maybe run like a Taste of Hate or just like a cold flask, but I don't think it's really necessary. I think it's better to just target which one you want because these other flasks are going to be very nice for us. So Dying Sun, the increased area effect is very relevant with this build. And the extra 2 projectiles, it just adds a ton of damage. Next we use a Vessel of Vinctar. So whenever we activate these 3 flasks, our lightning is still the highest. cold is still the lowest, so we still get the lightning penetration there. For the type of Inctors you want one that penetrates more lightning resist. It's kind of the theme. We're trying to cut as much resist as possible and do the damage that way. So we have Wise Oak, Vessel Vinctar. We actually have Elemental Weakness on hit, and we have lightning penetration. So we really cut through a lot of the lightning resist any of the enemies have. And the stronger enemies are going to have more, so we're trying to get rid of all of that lightning resist. It also gives us leech during Flask effect, which is not super relevant. It is a lot of leech though, and most of our damage is lightning. So as you see, it's 3,000 to 30,000 lightning damage without Flask up, without charges, all that kind of stuff. So it's a lot of leech. If you have Vessel Vinctar up and you're able to hit something, you're not going to die. You're just going to leech through it. Next up, we have Sulfur Flask. This is probably the weakest of the flask. It does have increased damage, which is always nice. So we pop it, we go up to 77. Let's see, without the flask, we have 72. So an extra 5k. It's definitely nice. And this damage stacks with these extra projectiles and this extra lightning damage, just for a lot of damage. Next is kind of a weird one, because if you look at our defense, our evasion rating is only 1300. And this adds 3000. So we only have 13% chance to evade, but we get so much percent increased evasion rating for intelligence, and we have almost 1,000 intelligence, that we're going to get massive amount of percent evasion. So when we pop this flask, we actually go up to 40%, 48% evasion rating and 1300 evasion. Just really nice, because we're CI, so we're like kind of susceptible to melee, but the Juggernaut really helps to fix those issues. So guys, that's really it with the gear. There are some things we can upgrade. Like, you can get a Shaper's Claw that's better than Hand of Wisdom in action. You definitely want to get a Helm enchant at some point if you're going to take this build to the max. Obviously, we've done Uber Elder with this build, so it's not really necessary, but we're probably going to go look for one anyway, just to have this character really min-maxed. Other things we could do, we could get the 6th stat on our rings. That would be nice if we could get a tier 1 lightning roll, or maybe a higher rank elemental damage with attacks, and then craft lightning. Those would be basically the best rings for this build. It would be a double resist, intellect, ES, weapon elemental damage, and lightning on a resist base. Shield, you can always replace the shield with a higher energy shield. It's kind of personal preference. I just like the Exile Aura effect. I think once you get around 10k ES, you're going to be sitting pretty anyway. We can get a useful corruption on the Cyclopean Coil. You can get percent strength and percent int would be the best one. We can go do some lab and get one of the enchants where it's either the large flat lightning if you haven't killed recently, or the damage penetrates resistances if you haven't killed recently for bossing. If you want to be a little faster with mapping, you can get the attack and cast speed if you killed recently, or even the leech. The leech would also work. It's also possible to replace the amulet, but it seems very difficult, and I don't know if we're going to be trying to do that, because just 116 attributes is just so much. It gives us so much, it's almost 1,000 energy shield, how much damage, 57k to 72k. It's just so much from an amulet, so the amulet has to be very expensive to be able to replace this. Jewels, same thing. We can always upgrade from 3 property jewels to 4 property jewels. Most of ours are 3. We have a couple of 4 props that are the regular jewels, but we haven't gotten to the point where we've been able to afford the 4 prop Abyss jewels. Alright, and that's it with the gearing for this build. So let's talk about the passive tree next. So we go Juggernaut. We'll talk about the Ascendancy. Well, we'll talk about our keystones first, actually. So we're CI, so 1 life, immune to chaos, and we're just going to be getting a bunch of energy shield to try to fix this issue. And we're going to leech energy shield instead of life. We're going to regen energy shield instead of life. If we do a crit, we're going to do more elemental damage, which is nice because we're not going crit anyway. And last but not least, we have point blank. So we're a melee build. We're going to hit things up close we're a melee build that does projectiles. So we're going to be using point blank to deal just more damage because we're always going to be close to the targets. Useful things, we go out this way to get this mana leech. You could get this on a ring if you want to give up some damage, or if you can just find a really GG ring, that would save you a point. You can actually put point blank as a gem in your 6 link if you want. I didn't do that just so I could go an extra damage modifier, because you have to drop like damage on full life. I wanted to keep all that together. But let's talk about the Ascendancy. So CI is a very easy to get stunned, so we get Unstoppable. Cannot be stunned, more movement speed, which is always nice for melee, and just slow characters in general. Helps our shield charge as well. Action speed cannot be modified below its base values, so we're unaffected by temp chains, by chill, that kind of stuff. And it doesn't say it, but you can't be frozen, so it frees up a flask slot for us. Next we have 1000 accuracy. Attack speed is increased per 200 accuracy. So if we look at our accuracy, or let's just look at it for Molten Strike, this gets us all the way up to 95% accuracy rating. So we have 8.9k. So that's going to give us a lot of attack speed. I'm not going to do the math right now, but it's a lot. A lot of free attack speed by this node, and also if you've dealt a critical strike in the past 8 seconds, you get 30% increased accuracy. That doesn't actually apply to us because we have so much accuracy anyway. And you get increased damage if you've dealt a crit in the past 8 seconds. So when you deal a crit, you get undeniable buff, 30% increased damage, and you also get the 40% more elemental damage. Almost all of our damage with this is elemental. As you see, main hand physical damage is only 100 to 300. Next we have our endurance charge generation. This is one of the main reasons to pick Juggernaut over. But yeah, these endurance charges help a lot. Keeps your resist high even for like LA weakness maps. We're almost capped anyway, but it definitely helps. Last but not least is the Unbreakable. So it gives us 2% life regen, which we use Zealot Oath to turn into ES regen. 5% flat reduced damage taken, very nice. Increase armor from body armor, so 1400 there. And then we also have 1000 from our armor there. With the percent that we have, gives us 9k armor, which isn't bad. A little 42% physical damage reduction. And then we also get physical damage prevented in the last 10 seconds is regenerated as life, which this is super nice. It keeps us topped off. This plus Aegis kind of just heals yourself. You can AFK in almost any situation. The rest of the tree, we're going after a lot of attributes, a lot of accuracy rating, especially since it gives us percent accuracy and the reduced mana cost. Also the attributes, very nice. Get a little life regen, more attributes, a bunch of jewel sockets all over the tree. Same kind of thing over here. Get some more resist and elemental damage, some penetration. We'll actually take this minion wheel that makes minion damage apply to ourselves, which is nice. It's a lot of flat damage. You could just go like 3 points and get Celestial Judgment. You could go for this elemental damage here if you're worried about elemental reflect, or this elemental wheel here if you're worried about elemental reflect. These are all good nodes, but a lot of them are conditional. Like this is only damage while you have like during a flask effect. So this is just generic damage. 12, 12, 20, another 10, and another, what is it, 15? There's a lot of increased damage here. Go grab our keystones, get some more life regen. Movement speed, attack speed, all that stuff is really good for us, so we pick up even more. Energy shield everywhere with attribute. And increased lightning damage. Effective shock and lightning resist. There is like another way you could build this build. You can forego going down here at all. You would stop at this point here. Actually, you would stop up here. You wouldn't take any of this. You wouldn't take this jewel. You wouldn't take this jewel or point blank or the leech, because that's all you're really going down here for. And you would instead go this way. You get some energy shield, the max res, you would grab the mana and intellect here. And you also grab the jewel socket there, and you could get the lightning damage and penetration wheel up here, and maybe drop the minion or have both of them. That's the other way to play the build, but you'd have to somehow figure out a way to get point blank, and a way to get mana leech. So I feel like this is the easier way, and it really frees up like some of my gearing. I'm gonna have this, so I think some combination of Lunaris plus Growth Coil for mapping, and probably Soul of Arklari and Soul of Urgol for Uber Elder, Shaper, and Elder. We'll talk about our main gym setup first. We're using Molten Strike with Elemental Focus, Elemental damage with attack skills, Ancestral Call, Lightning Pin, and damage on full life. For movement skills, we use Shield Charge with Fortify and faster attacks. For auras, we have Purity of Elements, Herald of Thunder, and Clarity. We also have Discipline, but that's in our gloves. And then we use Flame Dash just to get around. We leave it at level 1 because it keeps the mana cost low. We want high quality so you get the increased cooldown recovery speed. Next we have our Immortal Call setup, so just Immortal Call with a level 1 casting damage taken, increased duration, and we also use Phase Run. The Phase Run is really just for doing Delve. It's easy to get stuck, so we'll use Phase Run to kind of get around a little faster. And we have Blood Rage, so we'll actually be able to put those Frenzy Charges to work. So in our gloves we have our Blood Rage, increased duration again, so it lasts for 18 seconds. We have Discipline and Ancestral Protector. So this increased duration is linked to Discipline, and we want to swap this out for a Vol Discipline. We haven't yet. We're currently leveling a bunch of disciplines, so I'm hoping that one of them turns into a Vol Discipline, and maybe the others will turn into level 21, and we'll get some money. And last but not least, we have the casting damage taken setup. It's a level like 20 setup, so we're going to be using Cold Snap, which just kind of applies chill. Sometimes it'll freeze, but kind of rarely. And then we have Lightning Golem to keep our Golem out all the time, which just gives us more attack speed, which is very nice for the build. The more we can attack, the faster we can get these Molten Balls out, the faster we can leech, all that kind of stuff, the faster we can actually clear. You can switch out Cold Snap for like a Tempest Shield, and maybe run like a Roomies instead of one of these other flasks if you don't want to run that. Get a nice 20% Roomies instead of a 16. You'd have 32 from the shield, another 20 from Roomies, bringing you to 52, and then 55 with the Tempest Shield. So it would be a very nice block if you did that. It would definitely help the Aegis out a lot. So instead of every 1 in 3 chance to proc the Aegis, you'd have every 1 in 2. Hey, thanks everyone for watching, and please like, comment, or subscribe. Let me know if you liked this kind of video and if I should make more. And yeah, if you have any ideas for other videos you would like to see, just let me know. I'll put all the information that's needed for the build in the description of the video. And see you guys next time.